Good morning again, Green Spring. I'm here today with Sy Wengrovitz, and he's going to tell us about his life. We're going to explore a lot. You've probably seen some of the sculptures, the wood sculptures that he's done. I hope you did, over at the art show that we had a few weeks ago, because they were really beautiful exhibits, and he had a lot with him. So you're only going to see a couple today, but they're great. Also, we're going to talk about his early life. And so, Sy, it's so good to have you. Thank you for coming on Who's Who. Tell us about your current family, your kids. What are they doing?
We have 3 children. Our oldest is in Concord, Mass. He's an electrical engineer and is doing fine. We have one living here in Arlington, Virginia, and he also was an electrical engineer. And then we have a son living in Lakeland, Florida, and he is a stockbroker and financial advisor.
Well, that's good to have a stockbroker and a financial advisor in the family.
Yes.
And electrical engineers too.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Well, and your wife Judy, she is quite an accomplished artist.
Yes, she is.
Yeah. And she has I think her artwork is up on the wall in Hunters Crossing right now, isn't it?
Yes, and it comes down shortly after this program is over.
Today?
Today.
Oh, so if you haven't seen her work, I suggest you go over to Hunters Crossing now. No, wait until after the show. Wait until after the show. All right. All right. What about your early years? Where'd you grow up?
I lived in Brooklyn, New York, in the Coney Island, Brighton Beach area, and lived there until I went to college.
What'd your parents do?
My mother was a homemaker, and my father worked in the clothing industry. And he was a tailor. And the owner of the shop, or the designer of the clothes, would give him a floor plan or plan of what an article of clothing would be, and he would prepare the sample. He would take the article of clothing, the drawing, and convert it into a actual model, and then they develop the plans and go into mass production with it.
Yeah, he sure would be proud of you today, since you're making all these clothes, wouldn't he?
Somehow I think that trait came down to me eventually, yes.
Yeah. I can see that. All right. So what about your schools, your high school?
I went to what we call a school, it was Brooklyn Technical High School. It was a magnet school in New York City, one of 3, similar to Thomas Jefferson High School here in Virginia. And it was, at the time I went there, it was an all-boys school, 7,000 boys in one 8-story building occupying a whole city block. So it was a big, big school.
You could get lost in it, huh?
Yes. It was huge. It had classrooms, it had shops, it had special activities, it had broadcast stations, it had 2 gymnasiums, so it was a huge, huge building.
Was it also college preparatory?
Yes. Okay. It prepared, had a choice. It prepared people to go on to a trade if they wanted to, or to get into college.
Now, you said it was a magnet school, so how did you get into that school?
I had to take an examination.
Oh, okay.
And then not only that, but you had to have recommendations from your principal and school advisors, so a combination of both.
Okay. Well, that sounds interesting. And what did you pursue?
I took the college preparatory course, which gave me enough credit hours in taking up English, language, second language. I had mechanical drawing, I had shops, I was a blacksmith for 6 months in the electrical area. I was a tinsmith, and I was in a wood shop for a couple of months, so I had a lot of experience and a lot of different shop work.
And drafting, I'm sure you had to.
Drafting was in the classroom, and the drafting programs were tied into the shop work, so that they combined. If you had to tinsmith work, you had to cut out metal. Well, you had to have a plan to cut out the metal, so we had to draw the plans to do that, so it was combined.
Now, you were preparing when you went to college. You were from a technical school. Did you get into the technical area in college, or?
Well, I went to City College of New York, and I had planned, and I did, go into the civil engineering program, but the first 2 years of college work was preparatory. Everybody took the same course, same series for 2 years, language, math, very heavy on math. We had to go into calculus and advanced calculus programs, and then the last 2 years you specialized in the area that you wanted to get into. You had civil engineering, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, were the three primary engineering programs that they had.
They were in other areas too, though, weren't they? They weren't just an engineering school.
No, this was the engineering program was in one college. City College was, they had all sorts of programs going on in different buildings. So it was more of a university than it was as a matter of fact, it's university now.
Yeah. Oh, is it?
Yes, it's part of a citywide program.
Not part of New York University, or is it?
No, New York University is a private school. City University of New York is a combination of, at the time, like, consisted of Queens College and a number of different colleges were combined.
Okay, well now you graduated from college, and I presume you graduated as a civil engineer, and you got a job as a civil engineer?
Yes, I did. I came to work here in February of 1947. 1951.
Fort Belvoir.
Went to work at Fort Belvoir and spent about 12 years there. And working in the engineer research and development labs at Belvoir right on the Potomac River.
We called it Erdl, as I reckon.
Yes. At one time they changed the name from Erdl to something else, and in French it was a word that they didn't like, so they changed it again. But
okay.
I won't mention the word.
So you went from the research, or the engineer lab, where, the Pentagon?
I got a job at the Pentagon in civil defense work. It was at that time we had problems with the Russians in Cuba, and
this would be 62, wouldn't it?
Yes, and the tension was focused on nuclear preparations, nuclear war preparations, and I got into that area in terms of how to resist nuclear weapons effects, structures to resist nuclear weapons effects, and what you can do with them.
So protection against nuclear effects.
Eventually that agency was merged in with what we now know as FEMA.
And so you became part of FEMA then after?
After several years, we left the Pentagon and went into Washington, D.C., and we migrated from one building to another until we eventually ended up in the FEMA building, which was a combination of several different agencies that were merged into it.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's see, you must have gotten married in this period since we have 3 kids.
Well, yes, I got married after I came down to Fort Belvoir. I spent a year as a bachelor, and I was engaged to my wife, but we promised our parents that we wouldn't get married until we both graduated from college.
So she was home.
So she graduated from school a year after I did.
Okay.
And after she graduated, we got married in February of 1952.
All right. Well, after you retired then from the government, you got interested in woodworking, wood carving, because you've been interested in woodworking all your life.
Yes, I've been.
But you really got interested in wood carving.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what was the? is this the picture that we're going to show that,
Well,
that got you interested in the?
well, before, this picture deals with how I got into doing clothing.
Oh, okay.
But-
Well, let's not show it yet.
Uh,
All right.
But what actually happened is when I retired, my wife said, find something to do because you're not going to stay home doing nothing. And she was, as it worked out, she was teaching a workshop in Tennessee, and nearby town was called Gatlinburg, and I didn't know it. I walked through Gatlinburg one day and passed a wood carving shop, and Gatlinburg was wood carving country. And I saw faces carved in tree limbs in the window of this shop. And so I went in, bought a knife, bought a tree limb, and bought an instruction book. And I started carving faces and tree limbs.
And this was what resulted.
That's an example of my very early work done about late 84, early 85 time frame. And I did
This is one of your first pieces then?
Yes, very, very, probably my second or third piece. Carved with, as I say, from taking instruction from the book. And I eventually merged, after doing tree limbs, I carved faces and put the faces into constructions and did a whole series of carvings with musicians. Playing a banjo, playing a violin, playing a clarinet, playing a saxophone, the accordion, and a bass. And so and after that, now we should do.
Now we can show the picture. See if I do it this way.
I eventually, after doing some carvings with carousel horses, my wife and I were in New York City one time, and we passed by a Banana Republic store. And that's a photograph of the window with the articles of clothing that were in there. And when the sun was shining on that, I took a photograph of it because to me it looked like wood. And I wondered if I could do something in wood that looked like an article of clothing. And I tried it, and my God, the first thing that happened was I sold it immediately after I built it. I said, hey, wait a minute, something's going on here. Let me try some more. And so that's how I got started doing clothing.
Well, you carved carousel horses, though. That was.
Yes.
Was that before you went into the clothing?
Yes.
Yeah.
Carved it, I did carousel horses. I did about 20 of them, small size, not full size, that were in effect, I did them various positions, standing, jumping, and prancing. And each of my grandchildren, when they got to be 5 years old, got a carousel horse as a present.
Uh-huh.
And I hope they still have them.
I'm sure they did.
And
They probably treasure them.
after I did the carousel horses, I got into doing some other things like intarsia work, which was a wood mosaic episodes. I would take out pieces of wood. My wife was an artist, and so I looked at an image and said, what is she doing? And in effect, what it is taking what you have, the image of a, I took these pieces of wood, different colors and different shapes to create an image. Mm-hmm. And that's what you do in painting. I said, well, let me try it in wood. And it's like a jigsaw puzzle. You take these different pieces of wood, different colors, put them together, and you have an image. And I did.
What do you call that?
Intarsia. That is an Italian word for wood mosaic.
Okay.
And in essence, and I did a whole series of those, and extremely tiresome because you can't make any mistakes. You have to, if you make a mistake in cutting it out, the pieces will not make them rectangular and won't fit into a frame, so you've got to be very careful with that woodworking.
And you have to be very careful in picking out the hues of the colors that
yes.
go into it.
You have to.
Marquetry, isn't that the?
Marquetry is very similar, but with marquetry, you do it with veneer, and it's flat.
Okay.
With the wood mosaics, you vary the thicknesses of the wood, and what that does is, when light hits it, it has a little shadow.
Oh, okay.
And these images or these people or forms come right out at you, and it has a three-dimensional effect.
Oh, okay.
So that you want light to show on it, either natural or electrical lights coming on it, to cast the shadows so these things come out, and you actually feel like there's people there.
Okay, I'm glad we got that, because I didn't understand that when you first started talking about it. But compared to marquetry, I understand the marquetry, but the mosaics, that sounds like it's even more difficult.
It is, because, as I say, you have to raise the levels, have different levels of the wood.
Yeah. Well, what do you use for your models? You made all of these.
Well, when I go doing clothing, I visit stores and see what I can find, and then I find something that looks interesting and attractive to me. I try to recreate it in wood. And what I have here is an article of clothing that I purchased at a Salvation Army store recently, and probably about a month ago. And I've just finished that in wood, and that's in this.
Piece of wood is at the end of the table, so we can see the wood, the model, as well as the.
I have the model hanging in front of me, and in essence, what I'm doing is creating layers. I start with a bottom layer and then build up on it, so that I can get a lot of detail that. And what I like for the viewer to do is to figure out or ask the question, how in the world did he do this? And if the question is asked, then the piece is a success. Because that's what I want the viewer to look at and just say, hey, what's going on here? How did this get done?
So this is made of many pieces.
This is another one of the pieces that I've done. I just finished this here in the wood shop at Green Springs, and yes.
You can even see the zipper if you can get in there.
And
there's a zipper right there.
By building this up, rather than starting with a huge block of wood and carving down and into it, my approach is to start from the back, the bottom, and work up, so that I can then do some detailed work and then overlay it and hide it or partially hide it, so that you can peek inside the zipper or inside the pocket or inside the belt and ask a question.
So this has layers. This has layers in use.
Yes.
Right here's a glue line. So glue line here, the glue line back here that shows the difference in the back. So how many layers do you have here?
Oh, I think there's about 4 to 5 different layers in there. Okay. The belt is separate, and the belt is glued on after all those layers of wood have been in there and have been carved. There's a zipper, there's a button, and a belt buckle, and you try to add everything and make it look very realistic.
Well, it sure does. Do we have some pictures of some other work that Sy has done? Tell us about that one.
Well, that one is in a wedding reception hall right here in Springfield, Virginia, just about a mile from where we're located right now. It's in their hallway, and it's I was commissioned by the group that built that or put that facility together.
It's called the Waterford, right?
Waterford,
yeah.
Waterford Receptions, and they asked me to do a wedding gown and a tuxedo jacket. And they provided me with the chairs. They wanted them to fit those chairs, and they're in their lobby. And so that's a men's jacket with a bow tie on the left chair. On the right chair is the wedding gown. And on a table in between the two are a bottle of champagne that I called Waterford Champagne. And the year that they opened is on there on a label on the bottle. And there are 2 glass flutes, and there is a cork on a tray. And it's all in wood. That's all in wood.
Well.
When I say glass, it's wood that simulates a glass flute. And the bottle is a wood bottle, or a bottle made out of wood. And the label was burned in with a burning tool that I had. So it was quite an event, quite a challenge to do that project.
I'll bet it was. Let's go to the next picture.
That's one of my shirts.
And the next one?
I rarely do painted wood, but that one was an early dress that I had done.
A little girl's dress.
A little girl's dress.
Next one?
I did a combination of things in terms of putting clothing on chairs and to tell a story. And that was for a Veterans Day display.
And it's a vest.
And it's a vest, but notice that the vest is completely around that chair. And it was a experiment of mine in being able to create and make wood look like it was bent.
Ah. Next one?
That's another jacket that my wife has, and I used her jacket as my model.
Do we have another one? There we go.
That's a shirt, one of my shirts, and there again I wanted to emphasize the curves and the folds, again making it look very realistic.
Well, this is, you know, these are fantastic, the different shapes, and now that you've shown us that it's in layers, that gives us, how do you pick your wood?
The wood is basically, I use one kind of wood most of the time. It's called basswood. Basswood is like pine, but it does not have the knots that pine has. It's a soft wood, but it's hard enough to hold an edge when you cut it, and it doesn't fall apart on you. So
how about splitting? It doesn't split either, does it?
It does not split. It's, as I say, it's a nice carving wood. It's a lot easier to work with than oak or other kinds of table woods, and that's why wood carvers use it.
Yeah. This is a common wood then for wood carvers.
Oh yes, it is. It is very, very common for wood carvers to use. Yeah. And I can get it here locally at the lumberyard that's close by here.
Well, I know you've won awards. I've been on your website, and you've won a lot of awards and a lot of, you've been in a lot of exhibitions. What are some of the awards that you've?
Oh gee. Several years ago, I won a Best in Show award in Baltimore.
The Artscape Festival.
The Artscape Festival, yes. I had entered the show, and they had never seen anything like this before, and that's and so I won a $1,500 award for that.
What piece did you use?
Well, it wasn't one piece. It was a whole. I had an exhibit, a 6-foot by 10-foot exhibit, and I had about 15 or 20 pieces there, okay. And so it was the entire unit that was judged, not just individual pieces.
Okay. How about exhibitions? You probably have at least 1 or 2 exhibitions a year, right?
Yes, I'm in the gallery. I'm also in when the shows come up, I enter them, and As a matter of fact, last week I sold a piece at a show, and so it was a good month for me. I don't have to hang it in my house.
I see. Well, you know, I've seen the prices that you have on your, and they're not cheap. But on the other hand, how much would you get an hour? Have you ever figured up how much you would make an hour for whatever you sell?
Well, probably about $5 an hour.
That's what I thought.
Somebody, you know, when I first started wood carving, there was a question that was raised. Somebody said, how do you make a fortune in wood carving? No. How do you make a small fortune in wood carving? Yeah. And the answer that was given was start with a big fortune.
that figures. There's a lot of artwork that's sort of like that, isn't it?
Oh yes, I mean,
start with a big fortune.
You do it for the love of doing it because you enjoy doing it. You don't do it for
You're not
selling.
trying to make money on it.
It's
and you know you finish a piece of something like this, and there's a lot of pride in it, I would think.
Well, I do. I'm proud of. If I don't like a piece, it ends up in the wood fire. You know, I used to have a fireplace.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And I always threatened if a piece was bad, I was going to throw it in the fireplace. Fortunately, I didn't throw very many pieces in there. But I must say this: I've only been in Green Springs since January of this year, and one of the things that I love about this place is that wood shop, because that wood shop is just
it's a good wood shop.
Fabulous, and they're very, very helpful there. And that's one of the things that attracted me to come to Wood Spring.
So I assume that you put a lot of hours in the wood shop then.
I go down to the shop every opportunity I can. If it's just for 1 hour or 2 hours, that's enough. And I'll visit it whenever I can.
Good. Well, Sy, it's been great having you on Who's Who, and I hope that the people have learned a little bit about wood carving, and you know, you're interested in it, and so forth. And please, whenever you get an opportunity to see some of his products, look at them closely, because they're works of art. So thank you very much, Sy.
Well, thank you for having me.